So here we are at example 4 on page 25. This is the last part of example 4, and then we'll go ahead and look at example 5 together. So remember, this is looking at sedan data from the Consumer Reports table. And so now we have to answer why. What questions could be answered using this data? So in this example, you could come up with your own questions. Here's a question that I came up with that we could answer with this data. So one question I came up with is, which sedans have good or higher predicted reliability? So by good or higher, I mean that they score as good, very good, or excellent. So that's an example of a question we would answer with categorical data. Another question we could answer is, which sedans are priced lowest? And that would be a question we could answer using the quantitative data. Part B is asking you to draw a bar graph of one of the categorical data variables. So you can choose which categorical variable to use. I'm going to go ahead and set it up so that my x-axis is road test score. And then I need to label the axes with these different scores. So the lowest score is P for poor. And then the next score is F for fair. And then we had G for good. So notice how I'm skipping 3 for every placement of my letters to represent the different categories. And I'm going to go after good up to VG for very good, and then skip 3 more boxes for E for excellent. So just like in algebra, how you wanted to make sure to scale your axes evenly, you want to do the same thing in statistics. And you guys can handwrite this, so yours might look a little bit nicer than mine. I'm going to drop and drag my letters here. Okay, so I've got my scale for the x-axis set up with road score evenly spaced. Now, for the y-axis, I want to label that with number of sedans. And then we could go ahead and scale that by 1. So you could count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then go ahead and label every 5 with a 5. And then we would go, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and label this with a 10. So you can see, you guys can keep going counting by 5s in this way. And I'll go ahead and let you draw in what the bar graphs will look like and do your counting out. So you can go ahead and finish a bar graph, and you can email me or check with me if you have any questions. The next question is, why is a bar graph a representation of the distribution of this variable? So you remember to look back at the definition of distribution, and remember, distribution tells us we can see all the possible values and how often the variable takes on those values. So when we draw out our bar graph, we'll see that we can see the possible values and how often the variable takes on these values. Okay, so once you get your bar graph all drawn out, you'll see all the possibilities in the number of sedans, and you'll see that that's showing you the shape or the distribution of that variable. Now, example 5 is asking us to draw what's called a histogram. And so it tells us here a graph that shows the distribution of a quantitative variable. Remember, quantitative variables deal with numbers. Tells us at a glance what values the variable takes and how often it takes those variables. In a histogram, this type of graph for quantitative variables, You're not going to see the names of the individuals, but you are going to be able to determine at a glance the counts of how many or percents of individuals within each range. The horizontal axis typically shows the variable values, and then we'll also look at a stem plot where each entry represents one individual. So down here on the left, we're going to set up our bins for the prices of the sedans. And we want to have our bins evenly spaced. And so the bins are going to be how we categorize the values. So I think our lowest price sedan was right around a little bit less than $22,000, maybe $21,000. So I'm going to start the bins at $20,000. And then I'm going to count by twos. And see how I'm keeping this evenly spaced? And we're counting by twos because we think that'll give us a pretty good indication. This tip that says avoid pancakes in skyscrapers mean that we want to have equally or reasonably sized bins. We don't want all the data squished together, all the data stretched apart. So I think that counting by twos will give us, by 2000s, will give us a pretty good range. And then we want to go all the way up to 34,000 to encompass our highest data. And then our next step that we're going to do over here is count the frequency. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to an Excel and show you guys in Excel how to make the histograms. The version of Excel that I'm using is a Mac version. If you are using the PC version, you can see the example that I gave you in class, or go ahead and watch some of the videos that are posted on Desire to Learn, because there's some good examples of using the PC version of Excel. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open up Excel. Oh, here it is over here. All right, and let's see, you could ignore these values that I have in here. We'll come to those a little bit later. All right, and you can see over here on the left, we've got price, and then I typed in already all the prices for all 39 cars. So you'll notice that my first number starts in what we call cell A2. It's in column A and row 2, and you can see up here where it says A2. And my last data point is in A4, A40. So it's in column A, row 40. So altogether there's 39 data points there. Because I'm on the Mac, if you're on a Mac, you want to install something called Better Histogram. And so I go up to Tools and see where it says Better Histogram. I'm going to click on that. If you're on the PC, you need to use the Data Analysis Tool Pack, and you don't have to do usually anything extra to download that. And you can see the YouTube video that I posted in the Excel directions section of our course webpage. So I'm going to go to Better Histogram, and it's similar to this if you are working in the Data Analysis Tool Pack on a PC. And for data range, I'm going to type my first cell, A2, and then I'm going to do colon A40. And so this colon tells the Excel how to stretch from one to the next. And then my histogram start value, we decided that we were going to start our bins at 20,000. So I'm going to type 20,000 in here. And then remember when we filled out our table, we are counting by 2,000s. So we'll go ahead and put 2,000 in for the step. And then the stop values, we want to stop at 34,000. If you're in the PC version, you're going to actually type out all the bins over here just like I did in the table. I'm going to say OK, and a new sheet pops up my histogram. So I'm going to copy the whole histogram and see if I can go paste it into our preview. No, it won't let me paste in, so I'm going to go back and go back and look at this for our count. So if we look at our first bin that goes all the way up to 22,000, we think of that as the ending value, the bin number. We see our frequency here is 9. And then our next bin that ends at 24,000 has a frequency of 6. So I'm going to go back to our packet and enter those values. Now 20,000, there were no cars below 20,000. So that bin is going to have 0 frequency, if that makes sense. Okay. So our first bin is 0, and then the bin that ended at 22,000 had 9 cars in it, and the bin that ended at 24,000 had 6. And then we'll go back to our histogram in Excel. And then the bin that ends at 26,000 has 3 cars. And then the next bin looks like 8 cars. And then the bin that ends at 30,000 is 5 cars. You can also count by hand. It just takes a little bit more time. And then the next bin that ends at $32,000 is 6 cars. And the bin that ends at $34,000 looks like 2 cars to me. Okay, and then there's my frequency. Let me adjust my bins so that they line up a little bit better. There we go. So then you can use this to make your graph if you want to do it by hand. Your bins will be the tick marks on the x-axis, and the frequency will be the y-axis. So let's type a note saying that bin is the x-axis. Frequency is the y-axis. Okay, and your histogram should look like the one in our diagram. Now if we want to talk about the distribution of the prices, if we go back and look at our histogram, we can see there's an early peak and then a dip, and then a peak, and then the prices start to come back down. So it looks like there's a peak in the low end of prices and a peak in the middle of prices. And then part C, we're going to need to draw a stem plot. So we'll do that in the next video. So the next video is a stem plot.